from blind faith to reason, from superstition to science, from theocentric to anthropocentric. This is the age of Renaissance. That's what we are going to discuss today, the age of Renaissance that happened in Europe between 14th century and 17th century. And this period in history changed consciousness forever, particularly the European humanity, right? But we are trying to find out what made this possible, what made this transition from ignorance, from primitivism, from religious superstition to a sort of elevated consciousness of being able to reason, to philosophize, to view humanity from a new modernized perspective. What made it possible? It was the age of Renaissance that ushered in what we call the modern time. You know, it was like the mediation between our time and the primitive time. And when I say the primitive time, I'm talking of the Dark Ages in Europe. So we have studied classical antiquities, we've studied European history, we studied African history, and we are beginning to find out that African philosophy, African theories, African doctrines and teachings, we are very central in initiating and triggering what you call today as the age of Renaissance. And how did that happen? How did that happen? Well, if you study many history books, you are coming across the idea that the age of Renaissance was the age of rediscovery. Remember, rediscovery. Not just discovery, but rediscovery, meaning something was there already that was discovered again. And this is when we begin to decode what that means. What does it mean to rediscover? Rediscovering means that you found out again something that was already pre-existing. What did Europeans rediscover during the 14th through the 17th century that made them shift, or have a mental shift that led to what you may call more higher advanced civilization, advanced thought form? What made this possible? And I'm going to tell you, because when they encode, we decode. That's what we do. When they code, we decode. Africa was the foundational structure of Renaissance. And this is not the kind of things they are teaching in school. This is not the kind of thing you learn in classrooms. This is not the kind of thing that textbooks carry. You know, I went through a college, university studies, but I never understood that at the formation, at the basis, at the foundational structure of Renaissance was African philosophy. When I say African philosophy, I'm talking of African thinking, right? That is what made it possible. So during late antiquities, when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, and Egypt, I keep emphasizing this, Egypt is in Africa, and Egyptian civilization was developed by Africans. We know that later on, after the invasion upon invasion of invasion, the Lower Egypt was more dominated by what you might consider mixture of people, mixed races, right? The Indo-Europeans, the Arabs, and every other color in between. But original foundation, the original founders of Egyptian civilization were Black Africans. So for some of you, when you look at Egyptian society today, a country named Egypt, you're going to see Arabs there. These Arabs were new to the continent. These Arab people were not there in antiquities. They were not there thousands upon thousands of years ago. These people are very recent. They came as a result of continued invasion of the Mohammedan religion during the 6th century AD, right? They are pretty new. So we know that when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, Egyptian society and African society was Hellenized. Greek culture permeated every nooks and crannies of the African society. From that period, the Indo-Europeans started plagiarizing, started Christianizing, started vandalizing, started burning down libraries of the great libraries of Alexandria, and they were able to extinguish the great light of the world, which was ancient Egypt. They were able to bring ancient Egypt to her knees. And having destroyed the last remnant of the mystery school, because the mystery school is where everything was taught: science, religion, philosophy, psychology, mathematics, astrology. Everything was taught in the mystery school. Unlike in the modern time when we have this idea, which is a Europeanized, Indo-Europeanized sort of thinking, where science is separated from religion, the original thought pattern of an Africa is that these two are bonded together. You cannot separate divinity from the mundane. So this separation of religion from sciences is also very new, and that came as a result of the Indo-European left brain domination, right? So my point is that once Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and Hellenized the country, right? After the collapse or after the fall of Greece, we see that Rome also stepped in and conquered Africa. We see how the Egyptian desert became the seat of Christianity, the seat of ascetic monasticism, right? They began to Christianize the ancient Egyptian society by brutally attacking the mystery system. And why were they attacking the mystery system? Even though most of the theories, most of the soteriological doctrines, most of the theological doctrines that contained in the Bible came out of the mystery school. Maybe that was why they were so brutal in suppressing ancient Egyptian knowledge, right? So now, they destroyed the Library of Alexandria, they destroyed the mystery system, the last remaining Egyptian priests were all dead. What happened? The light of the world was extinguished. But many Europeans began to form secret societies and began to teach the ancient African knowledge, wisdom that frees humanity, true knowledge, true wisdom, true spirituality, not religion. They begin to teach African theories and African sciences in their secret chambers, in their secret societies. They began to form secret society and use the plagiarized knowledge they gained out of having access to ancient Africa to they begin to teach it in secret places. Now, we know that when Christianity finally gained access into the European mind, it ushered the period we call the Dark Age. The Dark Age was a period of superstition, it was a period of ignorance, it was a period when mankind got lost. By this time, the light of Africa has already been extinguished. And many Africans don't even know their history at this point. You know, most of them were driven way south into the rainforest area. So these people for thousands of years, 6,000 years, have been running, and they lost who they are. They lost who they are. The light was gone. And other people stole the light, right? So after the period of the Dark Age, something happened. During the late 13th century, proceeding to 14th century, we see that there was a rediscovery. And that is why when you read the age of historians call Renaissance, you see that they talk about rediscovery. Rediscover of what? I begin to find out what they rediscovered. And that which they rediscovered made it possible for them to initiate what we call today as the Age of Renaissance. And what did they rediscover? They rediscovered antiquities, pagan, quote unquote, pagan antiquities. They rediscovered the sciences of ancient Egypt. They rediscovered the teachings of ancient Egypt. They rediscovered the philosophies of ancient Egypt, taught in the forms of Neoplatonism, taught in the forms of Hermeticism. So you cannot separate Renaissance from Neoplatonism. You cannot separate the age of Renaissance from Hermeticism, right? This mystical, this esoteric kind of teaching was what they rediscovered. And this rediscovery was what enlightened them. That was the gold. That is what they don't teach people at school, okay? Even though many European scholars, when they think about Renaissance, they look back to Greeks, because as I said in my previous videos, Greece is the golden child of European civilization, right? So when they say they rediscovered classical antiquities, right, they usually consider Greece, but the fact is that Greece gained knowledge through Africa, through ancient Egypt, and without ancient Egypt, as we have been discussing in our previous videos, Greece would not know the light of civilization. Plain and simple. It was Africans who civilized Greece. It was out of the plagiarism, the stealing. They steal here, they steal there, and they hide this information, and then they utilize those information to advance themselves. So what they discovered when they say there was a massive rediscovery, it was because they began to study classical antiquities. And it was knowledge from classical antiquities that led to them being able to reason rationally, being able to shed off the darkness of ignorance, right? We know that Renaissance was like a mediation between primitive European dark ages and what we consider the modern time. So from this period after the Renaissance, proceeding to 17th, 18th, 19th century, we see that Europe got enlightened. And from the 14th century, when Renaissance was going on, we see that European global expansion became possible. It was in 1492, for example, that Christopher Columbus, who quote unquote discovered America, arrived in North America, or in South, I think he first arrived in South America, right, in 1492. What gave them this global confidence? It was the rediscovery of antiquities, the occult teachings, the esoteric teachings of ancient Africans. And because this knowledge has been so hidden from Africans, they don't have access to them. They think it's paganism, they think it's evil. And because they think it's evil, even those in the modern time who could study these mystery systems, they don't seek after this kind of knowledge that ancient Africans utilized to enlighten the world, because the same people who took away the knowledge told them, deceptively of course, that it was evil, it was satanic, it was anti-Christianity, it was everything paganistic, but without the quote-unquote paganistic classical pagan antiquities, particularly those coming from ancient Africa. What you have as Renaissance would not be possible. So What are the characteristics of Renaissance? What happened during this period? Man, for the first time, was able to look at himself for the first time. When I say man, I'm talking about European man, because for thousands of years, Africans had always had this knowledge. But for the first time, the European man was able to look at himself introspectively, and they put man at the center of the world. You know, from the world went from European world went from theocentrism to anthropocentrism. Theocentrism means God-centered, superstition, ignorance, to where man now attains cognition, attains sort of enlightenment, is able to utilize his reasoning process to solve human problem. And this was the time when humanism, what you consider humanism today, was born. It was born from out of the thinkings of Renaissance philosophers. But we know for certain, we know as crystal, as clear as it is, that these philosophers, these Renaissance thinkers, were all highly obsessed, neurotically obsessed with classical pagan antiquities, particularly the Egyptians. So what kind of things did they study? What kind of things were they reading that helped them to achieve this knowledge, this enlightenment, this human liberation from ignorance? They studied Egyptian secret teachings, Egyptian occult teachings. When I say occult, because people have been so reprogrammed, the occult simply means hidden. That's what it means. It doesn't mean satanic, it doesn't mean evil. You know, it just means hidden. That is the literal translation of it. So, because in ancient Egypt, the mystery school was hidden from a lot of people. Not everybody had access to this kind of teaching, right? Unless somebody is what you call an initiate. You have to be an initiate. You have to be initiated into the process, like induction. You have to be inducted into the cycle to be able to learn what they teach those systems. So we are going to make this very brief